We'll continue with this session on global governance with our special guest from Islamabad, Pakistan's National Security Advisor, Dr. Moeed Yusuf. And before we took that break and we lost that connection, we were asking him, or he was in fact telling us of the cost that Pakistan has paid as a result of 40 years of war in Afghanistan, both monetary and as far as terrorist attacks and the human cost is concerned. Dr. Moeed, there have been hearings held in the United States dissecting the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and Pakistan's alleged role in what transpired in Afghanistan with the Taliban takeover seems to become a point of convergence for both Republicans and Democratic lawmakers. Why do you think Pakistan is blamed for the situation in Afghanistan and the rise of the Taliban in that country?
I'm sorry, I can hardly hear you. What I've understood is you're saying there is an allegation on Pakistan about what happened in Afghanistan. Look, if that's the question, we've heard this story for the past 20 years. There's a reason behind it, and the reason is that there needed to be a scapegoat who would be blamed for the internal failures in Afghanistan, the failures of the Afghan government, or governments rather, and a convenient narrative for the Western world or those countries who were present in Afghanistan and did not have much to show for what was happening there. Let me just implore the audience here. There is a war that continues. You have $2 trillion poured into Afghanistan. The average per day cost is $300 million for the US. Pakistan's entire national budget is a minuscule fraction of what is spent. And then you have an army, 300,000 strong security force, trained and equipped with the world's best weapons, fighting what we know for a fact, a lightly armed militia. The army does not fight. The president basically decides to flee the country, and the blame is on Pakistan. I mean, are you saying that Pakistan with no resources had some magic that it was playing, that it was affecting what was happening in Afghanistan? There was no time in the past 20 years that the Taliban did not control at least 30-40% of Afghan territory. They had local support. They had local sanctuaries. Why on earth would anybody need support from Pakistan? Now, let me also tell you, it took 14 days for the country to collapse, the Taliban to take over, and a false fake news network which was played out for 20 years, again talking about Pakistan sending army and drones. And this was debunked not by Pakistan, but by Western outlets, Western media outlets who are respected around the world. The point I'm making is it is too convenient for the world to continue finding a scapegoat. Happens in every war. You look at the Vietnam War, you look at any war, and the loser is going to find a scapegoat to blame. But the fact of the matter is you are blaming the victim in this case. You are blaming a country of 220 million people who have lost because of this war next door. Pakistan had nothing to do with 9/11. Pakistan didn't ask the US to invade Afghanistan, but we did lose 80,000. We did lose 150 billion in the economy. Pakistan faced terrorism and fought for its own survival a decade ago, a kind of terrorism we had never seen in our country. So please, I think people need to be sensitive to the fact that there is one country that suffered. After Afghanistan, we are the country that suffered most, and we are the country that has helped most. Please go and ask Washington. Haven't they said it on record that the Doha peace process in which the Taliban and the US were engaged could not have taken place without Pakistan's support? We were asked to facilitate talks. When we facilitated talks, we were then blamed for controlling the Taliban. When we couldn't facilitate because the Taliban wouldn't listen to us, we were told, oh, you are not strong enough to do what we are asking you to do, and thus you're irrelevant to us. You know, this mantra of do more, which we kept hearing as Pakistan, is the most insensitive thing you can say to a country that has had 80,000 casualties. You tell me,
all right. Let's move this conversation forward. 1 week ago, you hosted the US Undersecretary of State, Wendy Sherman, in Islamabad. Tell us, did you convey these reservations or this point of view across to her? And what was her reaction?
You see, I have always used three words to describe Pakistan's current approach to foreign policy. It has to be unapologetic, it has to be proactive, and it has to be pragmatic. We don't base our policy on emotions, but we are not going to apologize for what we stood for. And what we stood for was peace in Afghanistan. And one word the Prime Minister of Pakistan constantly used, one phrase: political settlement of the conflict in Afghanistan. For 20 years, Pakistan kept telling the world there can only be a political settlement, no military solution. We were not listened to. And the end result is in front of everybody. Yes, we did convey it to the US Deputy Secretary of State. We conveyed it in every official conversation. And there is private recognition. But publicly, unfortunately, it doesn't suit many countries, because then what you're really doing is pointing a finger at yourselves. Now, let me also say this. If the world would have listened to us about the only option being a political settlement, years ago, with much less bloodshed, we could have come to an arrangement in which there would be an automatically inclusive government. The Taliban would be included, all other political factions would be included, with much less body count in terms of the lives lost. Unfortunately, that window was missed, and we got to a point where essentially the state collapsed. And when the state collapses and you have a victor, it is very difficult then to talk about negotiations and finding a middle ground. And that's unfortunately what has happened in Afghanistan.
Dr. Moeed, has the United States asked Pakistan for access to military bases inside Pakistan? If so, what has your response been?
Our response is very clear, and the Prime Minister has put that response out in as unequivocal term as possible, which is we are not going to go there. You know, this government in Pakistan, you have to understand, we have a
So the
very clear
Americans did
policy.
ask. So the
Whatever we
Americans did
do
ask.
will be done transparently and within the bounds of international law. We provided bases to the United States after 9/11 under quiet arrangements which were not accepted by our people, and the end result was a massive backlash against the Pakistani state and people. We will not repeat that mistake again. Do we want to work with the world on counterterrorism? Do we have mutual interests in shared threats? Absolutely. Al Qaeda is a shared threat. The Pakistani Taliban is a shared threat. The Islamic State is a shared threat. Do we want to find a way to work with the US and others? Yes. Will that be transparent and within the bounds of international law? Yes. And that's the conversation we are having. Military bases is simply not possible for us politically, nor do we frankly see a need for that.
On October 12th, you said Pakistan was, quote, not in the old mold, whereby the United States can divide and rule Pakistan's house, talk to one official to get one thing done, then talk to another official to get another thing done. See where the path of least resistance is. Use the civil-military disconnect that used to happen and get what it needs. Is there a civil-military disconnect in Pakistan, and is the United States trying to exploit it? With the recent meeting of the US Charge d'Affaires, Angela Angela, with the COAS, General Bajwa.
I'm not exactly sure where you're going with this. Look, Pakistan has had a problem of a civil military disconnect. We've had coups in our country. And I think one of the problems that some in the world are having is that today Pakistan's civil and military leadership is on one page, has worked together for 3 years, working towards a common goal with a common vision for the country. What is that common vision? Economic security. Our entire effort is built around stabilizing and strengthening Pakistan's economy and following a geo-economic paradigm in which we want to work with all countries without any camp politics. We have an excellent relationship with China. We want an excellent relationship with the US and other Western countries. And we are the only Muslim country that can talk to all others as friends. So that's the vision we are following. There's absolutely no question of any discord on this vision. What a Charge d'Affaires does or meets somebody, I mean, meeting the Pakistani army chief, meeting the national security advisor, the prime minister, it's our call. If we want to meet, we grant that access. If not, we don't. I don't see any problem in terms of civil military on this issue. Rest assured, that conversation is history in Pakistan. The problem some may be having is perhaps they were too used to using one against the other. That option is gone. It's gone for good. We are one country, one state, one leadership, and that's how we will approach the world. Again, pragmatically, wanting the best of relationships with every country, China, US, Russia, Muslim world, everybody else. Why? Because we want the entire world to look at Pakistan as a geo-economic melting pot. We want the entire world to invest in Pakistan, to come into development partnerships with Pakistan. And mind you, the prerequisite for that is peace in our region. That's why we are working so hard to ensure that Afghanistan does not fall back into violence. We reached out, even worked on improving our relationship with our eastern neighbor, our arch rival India. Unfortunately, the current ideology of the government in India is fascist, is expansionist, and doesn't really respect peaceful coexistence. That's too bad, but we will continue to work in our region as much as possible to
Dr. Moeed,
ensure peace and tranquility.
Dr. Moeed, have you been invited by India to attend the National Security Advisors conference taking place there on Afghanistan, Regional NSA's conference in November?
I've seen on the media what you've seen, haven't gotten anything in hand. When I do, I will see what I want to do about it.
What are your thoughts on it? Will you be open to going to India to talk about Afghanistan?
I don't know what the forum is, frankly. I'll have to see what the forum is. We'll have to judge based on that. What I can tell you is Pakistan is working towards peace in Afghanistan, working with all regional partners, working with the Western countries. But I must tell you, forum or no forum, that's another question. We have also revealed to the world that there was one spoiler. For the past 20 years, India used Afghan soil and unfortunately Afghan state authorities, the previous state authorities, to not only undermine stability in Pakistan but directly sponsor and perpetrate terrorism in Pakistan. Innocent Pakistanis have lost lives because of attacks that have been traced back to India. And unlike any other country, this is very important, we put out a detailed dossier last year detailing where India was sponsoring and perpetrating terrorism in Pakistan. For that country now to pretend to want peace and be involved and be interested in getting peace in Afghanistan, frankly, seems like a sham. That said, I don't know what the forum is. When I get to it, we'll make a decision as a state.
But it's not just India, and this will be the final question, Dr. Moeed. You've got other spoilers as well. You've got Iran, which has its reservations with the Taliban taking over in Afghanistan. There's been some friction on the Pakistan-Iran border as well. India and Iran work closely as far as the Chabahar port was concerned. So are you concerned about other regional actors not wanting the same things that Pakistan wants?
First of all, let me just say, when I talk about spoilers, I'm talking about countries who, as a strategy and a policy, undermined peace in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, and that was India. Countries have the right to agree and disagree. If somebody has reservations, dialogue is the way forward. Pakistan has led regional diplomacy since 15th August. Our foreign ministers traveled to every neighbor of Afghanistan. We've talked to virtually every country that matters and wants peace in Afghanistan. We've hosted a conference of intelligence chiefs. Why? Because we want to get everybody on the same page to move forward and find a way in which Afghanistan can be peaceful and stable. Yes, there could be differences. Some could have one view, another could have another view. Pakistan doesn't look at relationships as zero-sum games. The spoiling element is India. The rest is talk, dialogue, conversations. We all come on the same page and move forward. There's no problem in countries having different views. India is a completely different category, and I'm sorry to say, if there is one country that is undermining peace in this region writ large, that has picked up a conflict with every neighbor, and dare I say, in its extreme form, is fascist when it comes to its ideology towards the region, that's India. That's a different category, and nobody else can be can be put in that basket.
Dr. Moeed Yusuf, National Security Advisor of Pakistan, thank you so much for joining this session on global governance at the 2021 TRT World Forum. Well, let's bring in the second part of our panel now on global governance and the challenges and opportunities of multipolarity. In 2019, the leaders of Pakistan, Turkey, and Malaysia met on the sidelines of the 74th session of the UN General Assembly in New York and committed to working together to provide an alternative platform for like-minded Muslim countries to fight Islamophobia. But then, in December of that same year, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan cancelled a planned visit to Kuala Lumpur to attend a summit between the same three countries. He did so reportedly after objections by Saudi Arabia, which was at the time dealing with the fallout of the Jamal Khashoggi assassination at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Now, 2 years later, talk of an alternative platform has largely disappeared, but the issues facing the Muslim world, such as Islamophobia, remain. To discuss this and other issues related to this challenge of global governance, I'm joined by Chandra Muzaffar. Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, he's the president of the International Movement for a Just World and also sits on the board of several international NGOs concerned with social justice and civilizational dialogue. We also have Murad Yeşiltaş. He's the director of foreign policy studies at SETA Foundation, and Tahmina Janjua. She's the former foreign secretary for Pakistan and is now a member of Pakistan's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining us from different parts of the world. I'll begin with you, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, in Malaysia. I'm assuming you're in KL. Is there a need for a stronger alternative platform, so to speak, to highlight Muslim issues? And if so, what's wrong with the older platforms, so to speak?
Thank you for this invitation. One of the reasons why those three leaders thought of an alternative, it seems to me, is because of their disillusionment with the OIC. And that's a disillusionment that has been developing over decades. And when you have a challenge like Islamophobia manifesting itself in different parts of the world, and Muslims are not able to respond to it intellectually, they're not able to provide leadership in dealing with the underlying issues, you'll find that leaders will want to think of something else. Don't forget that some years ago, a Turkish leader had thought of the group of 8. You remember? This was the initiative of the then Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, and he thought that he could bring a number of these countries together, including Malaysia and Egypt and so on. It didn't go very far. These endeavors have been there, and there have been other attempts. Indonesia, Malaysia, they've tried in different ways. What is important is, A, the endeavor is there. And this will go on. Though the KL summit did not work in a sense, because Pakistan was, in a sense, persuaded to withdraw from that summit. But Dr. Mahathir, who was the initiator, he went ahead, hoping that it would set the pace for later meetings and so on. He himself has not been able to pursue this, partly because of domestic politics. But I think that interest is there. And other leaders, not just in Malaysia, but in other parts of the Muslim world, will continue to pursue this. And the platform that they will choose, it seems to me, is economic cooperation, because they find that that platform is perhaps the most viable. And they've been able to achieve a little bit in this area. They've been able to work together on the new technologies. They've been able to enhance trade. And even though we would have expected more, given their potential, I think these countries are on the right track. So I'm not totally pessimistic about the future. I think there will be some earnest efforts, especially from a newer generation of leaders. And let me say this, that in many of his speeches, even though he didn't take part in the KL summit, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Imran Khan, has shown not just an earnest commitment to the idea of Muslim states dialoguing outside the framework of the OIC. He's also, I think, managed to address certain underlying concerns, unlike others. For instance, this whole question of Islamophobia. Islamophobia is not just Charlie Hebdo or an incident here and another incident there and so on. It's much more than that. Islamophobia has got a very long, long history behind it. And it deals with one of the most fundamental issues in intercivilizational relations between the Muslim world and the rest. And unless we deal with this in an honest manner, and I think that honesty has to come from the centers of power in the West, that you cannot go around asking others to dialogue with you and asking them to open up and to participate in meetings which show that Muslims are prepared to be critical of terrorism, to be critical of their own shortcomings, including the attitude towards women in some instances and so on. And that is something that has come to the fore in the whole question of Taliban and the return of the Taliban to power. You can't expect people to respond when you yourself don't want to respond, when you don't want to look critically at yourself, because to my mind, that is the fundamental problem. If Islamophobia has got a long, long history behind it, it is because the prejudice against the Muslim world, which is encapsulated in not just attitudes, civilizational attitudes, and so on. It is encapsulated in power, in the whole question of power, if that doesn't change. And there must be leaders who are prepared to speak up. And I'm glad that in a number of articles he has written and so on, Imran Khan has really spoken up on these issues. And that I
Well, let's
think
open it up.
is
Let's open it up,
something
Dr.
positive.
Chandra. You raised some very interesting, well, you go back into the history of Islamophobia. You talk about the role of Orientalism and how Muslims are depicted to the West, but also how Muslims view themselves. I'd like to focus it to the conversation to veteran diplomat, Ambassador Tahmina Janjua, former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. Dr. Chandra was mentioning that Imran Khan was persuaded not to attend the summit hosted by Dr. Mahathir Mohamad in 2019, December 2019. Why is it that Pakistan is so easily persuaded by its friends or countries and states that like to show off that they are its friends on critical issues that might be of greater importance to Pakistan? Ambassador Janjua.
Thank you very much. Thank you, TRT, for this opportunity to be at this forum. I think it's an unfair comment to make that Pakistan is easily persuaded to change its views on things. Pakistan has consistently shown that it has worked very hard, and I thank Dr. Chandra also for making references to Prime Minister Imran Khan's statements, as well as his op-ed articles, as well as the work that Pakistan has done in the United Nations, within the OIC as well, on bringing up and bringing focus on Islamophobia. Pakistan has been one of the lead proponents of the resolution that was adopted by the last summit of the OIC on Islamophobia. Yes, there is a lot that needs to be done. Yes, we need to sit together with like-minded countries within the OIC. Well, the OIC is not a small group of countries. It is 57 countries. So there will be differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, when you look at some of the work that has been done within the OIC on Islamophobia, it is useful. Yes, we need to do much more. There has been, if you had an opportunity to look at the resolution that was adopted by the last summit of the OIC, it clearly reflects the work was done by Pakistan, by Turkey, by Malaysia, by many other countries in this regard to bring in language which was fundamental. In addition to this, when you look at historically the question of Islamophobia, yes, it's been there. There's Orientalism, and Dr. Chandra is really put his finger on the pulse of the issue, i.e., it is also how Muslims look at themselves, and this opportunity to have a fair discussion on Islamophobia is one which helps us to move forward. When you look at, I'll tell you my own personal sort of example. It was in the mid-90s that I walked out of a meeting of the Human Rights Commission, then the Human Rights Commission, and heard for the first time the word Islamic terrorism. And I was furious about it because I said, how does one associate any religion with any kind of terrorism? Before this word, there were, I'm sorry to say, in the past, it was these kamikazes were not Muslims. People who killed people in suicide attacks were not Muslims. These all came from different parts of the world. Yes, these were, and therefore it was totally unfair to associate Islam with terrorism. And that's one point that we've been raising very strongly within the United Nations, especially within the Human Rights Council now. Pakistan, with the help of our friends, Malaysia, Turkey, and other friends from the Gulf countries, we've been able to bring and sensitize this matter within the Human Rights Council. The Secretary General of the OIC has also spoken about it. But yes, I agree that we need to have more practical measures that we need to look at. Those practical measures came as a part of a resolution which was adopted by the Human Rights Council and what should be done to deal with Islamophobia. And those are useful indicators for the rest of the world as well in trying to address and develop policies on Islamophobia.
Dr. Murad Yeshiltash, you've heard both our panelists before. How do Muslims, you as a Turk and a Muslim, how do Muslims view themselves? Do they view themselves in a uniformity as Muslims? Is that their primary identification? Or are they Pakistanis, Emiratis, Turks, Saudis? And if so, don't they or shouldn't they have their vested interests, which at times might be in contradiction to each other?
I think, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this important international forum. I think there is no homogeneous understanding amongst the Muslim communities all around the world with regards to the current international politics, which is one of the important dynamics behind the divergences among the Muslim societies. And many countries have different visions about international politics when it comes to the realities in different regions of the world, from Libya to Yemen, from Afghanistan to Iraq and Syria. So therefore, these geopolitical visions, divergences amongst the Muslim countries are preventing to create a common vision of international politics. It is obvious that they have also different vision in the context of United Nations international platforms. They have many different strategies vis-a-vis different international relations issues. Second level, I think, is about the visions of Muslim or Islamic identity or Islamic civilizations. As you know, it is common to speak about the Islamic civilizations. It has been an important debate, especially within the context of Muslim world since the end of the Cold War. But the 9/11, I think, has accelerated the debates among the different Muslim societies and Islamic countries all around the world. So the Islamic civilizations have became one of the important referent object of this world. But when we look at the conceptualizations about Islamic civilizations, we have also the same problem about the definition, what are the features, commonalities, the characteristic features of the Islamic civilization in terms of the world vision, in terms of the common historical past, in terms of the common cultural features. So we cannot say that they have the same Islamic civilization paradigm, which ultimately undermine the common understanding about. The third level is about the process regarding the interpretations of different Islam in different countries, because since the Arab Spring, Islam also became one of the important reference object for the policy practices of different actors, including state and non-state actors. I think there are many challenges in front of the Muslim Islamic communities all around the world with regards to the real challenges of the current international relations.
I think Dr. Murad kind of summed up the sentiment. We're talking about an alternative platform because other platforms seem to have failed. We're talking about some sort of convergence and coming up with an identity when we talk about Muslims and the Islamic world and the issues that they face. But I want to bring the conversation back to Afghanistan a bit. And I want to test this theory that Dr. Murad Yeshultash laid out in terms of Afghanistan. Dr. Janjua, or Tamina Janjua, I want to go to you on this question. Pakistan shares a 2,500 kilometer border with Afghanistan. Pakistan hosted up to 5 million refugees over 40 years that spilled over from Afghanistan into Pakistan. Pakistan provided refuge to what later became the Afghan Taliban and their fathers and grandparents who were considered the Mujahideen that fought against the Soviet Union. Why does Pakistan get so much slack or is blamed to such an extent by the West, hearings in the United States, when it comes to the question of Afghanistan? Dr. Janjua, or Tamina Janjua, please.
Well, it's nice to be called doctor without a PhD, but thank you. Anyway, Pakistan gets a lot of flack because you have to look at the current situation in Afghanistan. And I think everyone has said it. The Prime Minister has said it. I think Moeed Yusuf has also spoken about it. That why should Pakistan be scapegoated for the loss or for the failures of people who were there in Afghanistan for 20 so years? They had the best equipment, they had an immense amount of money, they had the best trained soldiers. They had people from all over the world who had an interest in security. They had contractors who worked there. They had so many different factors that were there to ensure the success of the government, of the Taliban government in Afghanistan, and yet they were unable to succeed. The reason was because the realities on ground kept on changing. And the fact is that Pakistan does not have the kind of the political power, the economic power, the military power to be able to support any people in Afghanistan. Pakistan has said it clearly. When we started the conversations with the United States and the United States started its conversations with the Taliban, we said it repeatedly, we have no favorites in Afghanistan. We want peace and security in Afghanistan because as far as Pakistan is concerned, peace and security in Afghanistan is vital for peace within the region and for peace and security within Pakistan. Pakistan has suffered immensely for more than 20 plus years from the conflict in Afghanistan. So why should Pakistan be blamed of what is happening in Afghanistan or what happened in Afghanistan? It was not Pakistan that did the agreement with the Taliban in Doha. It was not the president of Afghanistan, then President of Afghanistan, Ghani, who fled at the beckoning of the Pakistanis. It was their own decisions that took place, and at the end of the day, we kept on saying, what we want in Afghanistan is a peaceful Afghanistan, an Afghanistan which works, which is inclusive, which has everyone working, and it has become very clear. It was very clear when the Taliban went to the different regional capitals when the Ghani government was still in power, how they were received by the local people who were completely upset and had enough of the corruption that was there in Afghanistan. And they wanted peace in Afghanistan. That is why they accepted the Taliban to come into power. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan continues to say that we want peace and security in Afghanistan because it is important for us, for the people of the region. The success of any government in Afghanistan is the success of people of the whole world and the end to terrorism. We are worried that there are forces within Afghanistan that continue to ply there, the ISIS, the TTP, which is a terrorist organization attacking Pakistan. ISIS also attacks Pakistan. We are extremely worried that these terrorist organizations need to be dealt with, because if they continue to remain in Afghanistan, then spoilers like India will continue to use them against Pakistan as it has done in the past. So for us, it's important that peace and stability returns, and these are the points that the leadership in the United States, the Senate, and the media elsewhere needs to understand. Pakistan is being used as an easy way to put all the blame on. And we are saying, why are you putting the blame on Pakistan? Pakistan has nothing to do with the current situation in Afghanistan.
Dr. Muzaffar Chandra has been sitting there quite patiently listening to us, and I'm going to direct what you've said towards him, but in a broader context. The Taliban political office is in Qatar. The Qataris have provided a lot of support to the Taliban over the years, including that political office. Why is it that certain countries, certain Muslim countries, are blamed for excesses, whereas others are not? Does it come down to power, to financial power, to political clout? What is it, Dr. Chandra, that separates, let's say, a country like Malaysia and how it is perceived, as opposed to a country like Pakistan?
It's very complex. I'm sure geopolitics and bilateral relations in certain instances involving very powerful states, and of course the international media, segments of the international media, all these have contributed to the way in which perceptions have developed. It's not something that should surprise us. It is something which has happened right through history, that on a particular issue, you find that the positions adopted by a particular state generate different responses. And this was the case with Vietnam, those countries which were friendly with the Viet Cong, for instance. Some of them, they were treated in a certain way, while others that were friendly with the Viet Cong, for reasons that were not very different, they were perceived in a different manner. These things happen. So I'm not surprised that Pakistan is seen in a different way from Malaysia when it comes to some of these issues. And on the question of Afghanistan, its role, Qatar, and all the rest of it, I think what one has to do is to look at a particular situation at a particular point in time and try to understand that situation in order to comprehend what is really happening. On this score, let me very quickly add this point. I've been watching very carefully the response of Afghanistan's neighbors to what's happening in Afghanistan, because this is a very, very critical question. Whether there would be peace and stability in that whole region, whether the Taliban will change compared to what they were earlier on between 1996 and 2001, whether you're going to see different actors emerging and playing their cards in a different way. I think all this would depend on Afghanistan's neighbors too. Whether they approach this situation, this very fluid situation, with maturity, with tact, with wisdom. I must say that Malaysia's
tact, and wisdom.
response, wisdom.
So you said maturity,
I think
tact,
this
and
is
wisdom.
very important.
I want to basically move that conversation towards Murat Yeşiltaş, who has also been listening in. I know these forums, especially digital and virtual, can get boring because we're not sitting in person, and I'm posing these questions to you via Skype or Zoom or whatever, and we're trying to get these answers, trying to create some interest in this. Murat, Turkey also finds itself in one periphery almost. As Malaysia is in the east, you've got Turkey in the west at the doors of Europe. What is Turkey's role, actually, in all of this? Given what we've discussed, what Ambassador Temina Janjua has mentioned, what Dr. Chandra Muzaffar has mentioned, what role does Turkey play in all of this? Because Turkey has its own considerations, doesn't it?
Yes, I think when it comes to the Afghanistan, Turkey has been very careful in terms of designing its strategy under the framework of NATO. First of all, we have to look at what is the content of Turkey's policies in Afghanistan during the NATO mission. Turkey was very careful, especially about the military engagements. Turkey did not want to take any military role in terms of fighting extremist and radical elements in Afghanistan after 2001, after the 9/11. Rather, Turkey have been playing an active role on the ground in terms of providing infrastructure, delivering humanitarian aid and building the material capacity of Afghan military forces. And Turkey, therefore, I think has been playing a very active role, not only in terms of delivering its strategy in the context of Afghanistan, but also in terms of representing the very nature of NATO mission in Afghanistan in the context of regional geopolitics. So when we look at the Turkey's policies during this time, Turkey was also very active, has been also very active in terms of engaging different, ethnic and religious group inside Afghanistan in terms of engaging with them in a very, moderate way. So Turkey played a vital role in this context to bring the Afghanistan population of the different sub-communities in together to create an Afghanistan future. But after the collapse of U.S. strategy and after the failure of United States, especially in the context of nation building, state building process, Turkey wanted to be an active player in Afghanistan, not only because of achieving its geopolitical objectives in the context of wider regional rivalries, but also in the context of bringing or maintaining stability and political, stability in Afghanistan by supporting the current political deal and negotiation process between Afghanistan, Afghan government and Taliban. Yes, Turkey was really eager, especially to ruling the airports after the United States withdrawal. But unfortunately, this process failed simply because of some disagreements between Turkey and Taliban. Now, I think Turkey has priorities in Afghanistan. Firstly, Turkey wanted to support the political process between Taliban rule and other actors in the domestic context of Afghanistan, and Turkey is especially providing an important support in terms of Taliban's inclusive strategy about creating and establishing a new government. when we look at the latest visit of Taliban's members to Ankara, Turkey reiterated its position about the inclusivity in the context of Afghanistan. Of course, Turkey wanted to also play an economic role because there are many opportunities in Afghanistan, and Afghan people and Afghanistan state needs also support of Turkey in the maintenance of infrastructure project. As you know, Turkey has been very active in the economic domain. So Turkey, wanted to maintain its economic role in region. Finally, I think Afghanistan will be the next geopolitical places between the regional actors and international actors. But Turkey will want to play a positive role in terms of compromising different geopolitical interests in the context of Afghanistan. This is the reason why Turkey approaches Pakistan and other countries in the context of creating and facilitator role in the context of compromising different geopolitical interests in the region.
But don't you think, Dr. Murat, that Turkey's trying to do too much? Maybe trying to play too many sides? You mentioned Turkey being part of the NATO mission in Afghanistan. You also mentioned Turkey's interest in developing Afghanistan, but on the other side, NATO isn't necessarily always with Turkey on key issues, especially when it comes to purchasing Russian S-400s. There's a dispute there. The Americans want to sanction Turkey. There's also the presence of Iranian-backed Shia militias in Syria and in Iraq, alleged Iranian patronizing elements in Armenia, maybe even the outlawed PKK getting support, YPG getting support from Iran. So tell us then, given Turkey's position, given its desire to do a lot, you also mentioned Turkey wanting to work closely with Pakistan. We've seen military exercises between Turkey, Azerbaijan,
yes,
Pakistan, and Qatar that have recently taken place. Do you think there's this bloc emerging with Turkey at the center, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, and Qatar in one bloc, as opposed to the Iranians, the Syrians representing another bloc, the Saudis and the Emiratis a third bloc? Do you think there's this reconfiguration that is going on?
Yes, it is true that Turkey, I mean, not only Turkey, but also the international system is under radical transformation, and Turkey will be part of this transformation. Actually, Turkey has been under the transformation, which has been influenced and affected by the regional and international systemic change. It is crystal clear that Turkey has many problems with its allies in the western part of the world. Turkey has been one of the important military players under the context of NATO, and Turkey has been playing vital role all of the NATO's military engagement and military missions in different regions. But at the same time, Turkey has problems with European countries, and Turkey has strategic divergences with the United States over many strategic issues for Turkey. Yes, Turkish foreign policy, I think we should look at Turkish foreign policy's priorities in this context, in its surrounding regions, in its near abroad. So Turkey responded in a very different manner compared to the 2016, pre-2016 strategic landscape. And Syria became one of the important security problems for Turkey, not only in the context of disintegration of Syrian territorial integrity, but also in the context of proliferation of non-state armed actors. And Turkey responded militarily, and Turkey took many lessons from many different military operations in Syria. And Turkey, as a result of all these experience and lessons learned from Syria and Iraq in the fight against terrorism and other non-state armed actors, Turkey transferred its military and strategic understanding in Libya.
I think we seem to have lost Dr. Murad there. But I'm going
between
to
Turkey
turn
and
to...
Europe.
Yeah,
So
go
when
on.
it comes,
Go on,
yes,
Dr. Murad.
yes. So finally, so when we look at the, the central conflict and the many geopolitical conflict in this region, Turkey probably will one of the important player which can influence the systemic transformation in international relations, especially between the superpowers and the big powers. So when we look at the Turkey's experience of military engagement and active diplomacy, we can easily argue that Turkey will be, an important player in this region.
All right. Tamina Janjua, Ambassador, as we started the conversation, you said that you wouldn't agree that Pakistan is easily persuaded. But you cannot deny the fact that there are many persuasions out there trying to pull Pakistan in different directions. Given what Murad has said about Turkey's position and Turkey's role and consideration and expectations, what are Pakistan's expectations, considerations, and these various pulls?
Well, Pakistan, like any country, and Pakistan, let's not forget, is in a situated geopolitically where there are many interested countries. We've got a difficult neighborhood, like Turkey has a difficult neighborhood. We have a difficult neighborhood where there are several demands, even our close neighbors, as well as international actors who have been close in the region have had certain expectations for us. At the end of the day, obviously it's a very, very difficult situation. We have seen in the past how difficult it has been when certain demands were made. But today, as has been said earlier, Pakistan has been very clearly stating that Pakistan shall do whatever it does in accordance with its national interests. And its national interest also determined that Pakistan-Turkish relations are extremely important and that two countries can play a very important role in their respective regions and supporting each other as well. This has been evident in the visits that have taken place between Pakistan and Turkey, whether by President Erdogan or Prime Minister Imran Khan. I had the great opportunity of visiting Turkey when Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Turkey for the first time. And I was impressed by the kind of closeness that had developed there, the conversations that took place between him and President Erdogan, and the advice that President Erdogan was providing, which Prime Minister Imran Khan was taking very seriously, and the other way, and vice versa. So there is a lot of potential there, and not only potential, but as the existing relationship between Turkey is one of extreme warmth and great respect between the two countries. And I think this is where both of us can support each other. As I must say, Malaysia is an important partner, and I say especially as well because Dr. Chandra is there. But Turkey has a very special place in Pakistan. The militaries of the two countries have had close cooperation. Azerbaijan, Pakistan, Turkey have, as you've said, exercises as well, and this reflects while Turkey has clarity on what it wishes to do within its region, a very difficult region. Pakistan also has today clarity on what it intends to do within its region. And what it intends to do within the region is to work for peace and stability within the region, because without that, the 220 million people of Pakistan feel thirsted for development, for the many opportunities that are provided through development efforts. And I must say that we have great admiration for Turkey itself, which has been able to pull itself and put itself in a very important position within its region and globally.
You might want to work for peace and stability. You might have a desire to work for peace and stability, but the circumstances in your neighborhood might not lead to that conclusion. Dr. Chandra, I want to move the conversation towards you and broaden it up a bit. We spoke about Islamophobia, we spoke about what Turkey wants, what Pakistan desires, peace and stability, as Ambassador Tamina Janjua was saying, but you also have rising fundamentalisms, not just in the Muslim world. Next to Pakistan is India, where you have a majoritarian government led by Narendra Modi's BJP. In the past 7 years that he has been in power, you've seen rising number of cases of Muslims being lynched, attacks against Muslims. You've had the only Muslim majority region in India now annexed as a union territory. These things don't happen in isolation, right? Do they? Islamophobia, militancy, a reaction to them. Tell us about this context. Tell us about these rising fundamentalisms as a reaction to what is going on in the world, in this multipolar world, as we are seeing in front of us, Dr. Chandra.
This is a huge question. But if one can try to be brief in responding to this, I'm glad in a sense that a lot of people now recognize that religious bigotry, that this sort of exclusive attitude towards one's religion, sort of anti attitude towards other faiths, it is something which exists in all religious communities. And Hindutva, in the context of the Modi government, has brought this to the fore. And people now know that this is real. It impacts on both domestic policy in India and foreign policy. If you look at the way in which they've adopted certain stances. And it is important that we try to understand this phenomenon. It is something which has emerged in different religions at different times. Islam is not excluded. It happens, and the causes differ from nation to nation, region to region. It is perhaps even related to the nature of the nation state, why these tendencies get stronger and stronger in some instances. What the nation state expects of its citizens and how citizens react to the nation state. It's related to the question of identity. It is related to modernization and the way in which religious communities have reacted to modernization. It is a very complex phenomenon. And I think it is important that people pay attention to this and try to respond to it in a sensible manner. Look at the way in which we use terms. Sometimes we just borrow terms from a particular tradition without realizing that the term itself may not be appropriate. Fundamentalism, for instance, we use it very loosely and easily. But what is fundamentalism? For a lot of Muslims, if you hold on to the fundamentals of your faith, you're a good Muslim. You're not a fanatic if you hold on to the fundamentals of your faith. And that would be true of certain other religions too. But this is a term that came out of Protestantism in a certain period of time. And it has become popularized. This is the danger, that we very easily use terms which may not be appropriate. This is why when we talk about certain phenomena, I would say, yes, bigotry. There are many aspects of the Modi government which can be described as bigotry. And we use the right term, bigotry. I won't bring in terms like fundamentalism and so on to describe phenomena of this sort. So I think this is the first challenge, that let us name things in the right way. After we have named things in the right way, we analyze them and try to understand them and why they impact upon societies in different ways. The exclusion of religion as a phenomenon, which is associated with Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, I mean, and what had happened since, it may not be something that is happening in other parts of the world, and it may not be good for other parts of the world. Religion may have a role. It's a question of how it is harnessed. And it may be a very positive role that it may be able to play, whether it's in Turkey, because the Turkey of Erdogan has a certain view of religion that is different from the Turkey in early years. And likewise, I think a person like Imran Khan in Pakistan sees a positive role for religion. But he's not a fanatic, he's not someone who's advocating a very narrow view of religion. And these are the sort of understandings, these are the perceptions and perspectives which I think one should try to comprehend. And especially those of us who are from societies where religion is important for the people. And religion has played a very big role in shaping these societies. I say very often, for instance, that multi-religious Malaysia, one of the reasons why we've held together one of the most complex multi-religious societies in the world, is because of the way in which we look at religion. The vast majority of Malaysians, of all communities, how they look at religion, that has helped to cement relations in multi-religious Malaysia. If we didn't have that sort of attitude, that sort of accommodative attitude that is rooted in religion to some extent, if that wasn't there, then I think things would have been very different. So we have to look at this phenomenon in greater detail rather than just become unthinking camp followers of people in the West or even people in our own societies who are so taken up by Western perspectives on religion, on society, on secularism, without really understanding how they play out in our societies.
I think that's a very important point that you raised, Dr. Chandra, and this whole idea of Puritanism or revivalism, so to speak, not just being confined to religions. For some, secularism becomes a religion. National socialism, that kind of fascism, in fact, at times denounced religion, then co-opted it. I want to turn the conversation quickly to Murad, because I think if you want to talk about secular fascism or how extremes can be found on all sides, I think Turkey is a case study in this, somewhat, because the pendulum swings in trying to create an ethno-nationalist state to trying to franchise a large population which was considered religious, which was de-enfranchised or disenfranchised for decades in the society, where even covering your head with a headscarf would have you kicked out of a university, for example. So Murad, going back to you, how do you then deal with these fundamentalisms, these puritanisms, so to speak, that Dr. Chandra Muzaffar was talking about?
I think, as you know, Turkey is a textbook example to see how the understanding and practices of religion shape the very nature of politics and in the international role of Turkey in the context of state identity. Yes, you are right. Before 2002, especially before AK Party came to power in Turkey, there was a different practices and discourse about religion in Turkey, and in which states, identity has been constructed around the idea of secularism. But this secularism understanding was rigid and structured the very nature of society. So it was dangerous for Turkey's multicultural historical past. So therefore, when AK Party came to power in 2002, the different discourse emerged, especially in the context of relationship between religious and state, and the role of society, the representation of religion in the context of public sphere. So AK Party, I think, changed the discourse about all these practices about secularism and religious. One of the important advantages of Turkey, of course, was its historical transformation, political transformation. It was one of the important and strongest, democratic country which actually emerged after the Second World War. So as you know, after the Second World War into 1950, Turkey emerged as a democratic country, and it has been transformed itself as part of these democratic cultures and practices. But one of the important advantages of Turkey, it was a bridge country between East and West, which makes Turkey's identity, state identity, unique in the context of relationship between the East and West. And Turkey's different approach to the relationship between religious and state and religious and society also radically transformed, especially in the context of Turkey's EU membership process. Turkey's European Union membership process had made also huge impact over the transformation of Turkey's state identity. Of course, there are many problems in the international system in the context of transformation of the secularism, and the fundamentalism especially became one of the important problem in the Western society because of the the spillover effect of the Arab Spring, for example. The approaches of the Western countries, Arab Spring was very problematic, which ultimately shaped and transform the radical rights and fundamentalist discourse across the Europe. And therefore, the mainstream political parties and mainstream political approach, political actors relocated them alongside with the different, fundamentalist discourse because of their political interests. So they had to relocate themselves because the radical left, radical right, and other fundamentalist political views has been gradually became the central political narrative across the European countries. So therefore, the mainstream social and other democratic actors had to also relocate themselves by taking into consideration the impact of this rising and proliferate fundamental discourse. Of course, since the outbreak of COVID-19 as a global phenomenon, this kind of perception also is under radical transformation, which ultimately change the public spheres, change the main political climates and the geopolitical landscape across the international system very soon.
Ambassador Temina Janju, I apologize for calling you doctor. I've been surrounded by so many doctors of different fields today. It's on me. I do apologize, Ambassador Temina Janjua. Dr. Murad Yeşiltaş was talking about a complex identity and experience that Turkey had to go through. Pakistan, in many ways, is still going through this process. It has at least 5 or 6 different ethnicities with their own languages and cultural traditions, and it's trying to form, in the past few years, a supra-identity. How important is this formation of a supra-identity when it comes to nation states, Ambassador Temina Janjua? And could this eventually lead to this lust or thrust for majoritarianism? Could this eventually lead to even more conflict?
Well, I think it's good to pick up your point. Firstly, I must say it's good to hear me myself being called doctor, because I'm not a doctor. But thank you very much, and you may give me a degree from Turkey somewhere. Anyway, the most important thing is that this majoritarianism that has occurred within our region is a reflection of, the whole thing has come up, so to say, socially. It was always there. The Indian society was marked by social stratification. Today, that social stratification is manifested in the ideological underpinnings of the party in power, i.e. the BJP. The BJP does not have any place for Muslims, for minorities, and all they want is the subjugation of these people. I would not necessarily agree with Dr. Chandra on calling it bigotry. It goes much beyond bigotry because there has been a very clear manifestation of the horrors that have been perpetuated against Muslims and other minorities in India, about the killing of Muslims in general, about the fact that there is a law now there because of which, for example, in Assam, there'll be many thousand people who will be thrown out of India because they are unable to show themselves to have linkage to the land, so to say, and other laws that are existing there. Look at Kashmir, the only state in India, the state which was Muslim. It's not a state as far as Pakistan is concerned. It is disputed territory, has been taken over in a military sense, and all its laws are being changed to ensure that the majority of Muslims is replaced by people who can now, in case of a vote, change the entire demographics of the place. It's not Pakistan saying it, it's the international community saying it. It is the international NGOs, Amnesty International, everyone, talking about the intensity of the human rights violations that are taking place in India. You speak to an Indian Muslim, you'll be horrified of the horrors they have to go through. So it's not bigotry, it's much beyond bigotry, and it is much beyond what is shown. The reality is that the Indian political party, the BJP, is not only majoritarian, so to say majoritarian, controlling, ensuring that there is no space for Muslims and other minorities, Christians, even Dalits and others, but that there would be a complete, that the space would be, and you hear it every day, you read it in their media where they say Muslims should all go to Pakistan, Christians should go elsewhere, they should all leave because this is a place for the Hindus only. And this is a huge problem. It is not only reflected in the internal policies, but is reflected in the policies that the Indian government has towards all its neighbors, whether it's Pakistan, it's Nepal, it's Sri Lanka, it's Bhutan, it's wherever in the region they are. They have a very, very clear hegemonistic design. And unfortunately, what has happened recently, because of the United States' focus on this anti-China policy and the cord that is being created has further given a carte blanche to India to carry out its policies in the
Talk
way
a little
it
bit about
wants.
that. Talk a little bit about that, Ambassador Janjua. I was about to say, so
Yeah,
what? So what if India is
no.
mistreating its minorities? Because the Americans don't seem to care. For them, the Quad is more important. India's economic markets are more important. So they might have, or Joe Biden administration might be like all for liberty and freedoms and humanitarianism and so on and so forth, but minus India. All of it is kosher except when it comes to India, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, there's a lot of double speak that goes on. And if you, for example, sit in the Human Rights Council, you'll be astonished of the double speak that goes on there and how countries are beaten up for minor infringements, whereas India is allowed to sort of do whatever it wants to. The reason is that India, one, has a huge population, provides a market to many Western countries. Unfortunately, it's the Western countries themselves, it's not just the United States, that are not taking up this issue publicly with India. Whenever we speak to them, they always say, we always speak to the Indians on their human rights record privately. But what does privately do? It doesn't help those who are subjugated. And as a result, the policies that are being undertaken by India continue. One. Number two, the United States, you asked the question why the United States allows India to do that, because United States considers India as a pivot to its policy in South Asia and in Asia for trying to build up certain sort of constraints against China. And they see India as an instrument for ensuring that their policies in South Asia, in Asia are implemented, and that China is constrained to a great sense. So India is now a part of a small cog but a cog that the Americans are ignoring all its infractions on human rights or others as well, because they feel that India can provide a certain a sort of a tool, can be a tool against China. And unfortunately, this was discussed earlier in one of your groups as well. What is the global situation? The global situation right now is that there is multipolarity. We were going to talk about multipolarity, but there is multipolarity. But what is clearly looking now is the possibility of two powers coming up, the United States and China, and a conflict. There are, of course, those who believe that the conflict may happen between United States and China, which would have an impact on all of us, whether it's Pakistan, it's Turkey, it's Malaysia, whoever. It will have an impact on all of us. And that is where they believe that the problem is that we are of the view that the Chinese do not believe in having a conflict with the United States. They have said it openly. Their foreign minister, state secretary, has said that they would want that competition is okay, but confrontation is not acceptable. And this is what we need to guard against. And this is what India is helping the United States spur up, a conflict between those who are on the side of the United States and those, unfortunately, who will be asked to be on the side of China. Now, we do not want, none of us want to be on the side of one or the other, but on the side of peace and stability. There will be, so I'm of the view that Mir Shaima's position that there will be a conflict and that we are slowly slipping into the Thucydides trap is perhaps not realistic. What will happen that there will be conflict in areas where, for example, reform of WTO, where the Americans want WTO rules to be changed so that China is not included as a developing country in technology, in artificial intelligence. In these areas, there will be conflictual relationship. But otherwise, I think if both powers are willing to look at peace within the global context, I'm sure a way can be found. But the policy of the Trump era vis-a-vis China, it appears, is being pursued more rigorously, and that is what we need to be warned against. As smaller countries, middle-sized countries, we do not want to be the middle of such a crisis. And it is there that we, and I particularly say Turkey, Malaysia, and Pakistan, because we're all sitting here, can possibly develop some ideas on how to help the situation on ground. Difficult, I know Dr. Chandra may not agree with me.
Well, let's ask him.
It is.
Let's ask him. Let's ask Dr. Chandra. Dr. Chandra, do you agree with Ambassador Tahmina Janjua's assessment in ringing these alarm bells around India and a bipolar sort of world order, so to speak, emerging? Do you agree with Ambassador Janjua's assertions, Dr. Chandra?
Could you repeat it, please? Because my earphone was.
It's all good. It's all good. I'll repeat the questions. So, Ambassador Tahmina Janjua said that India is pushing for a with us or against us policy vis-a-vis the United States. That people are being, or countries are being forced to choose a side, so to speak, where there's one pole with China and the other pole with the United States. Do you agree with this assessment of Ambassador Janjua of how things are playing out or what might be happening in the next decade or two?
Oh, thank you. I do not think that the position adopted by a particular country, however big or important it may be, will determine the pattern of relations between China, the US, other countries, and so on. Now, why do I say this? This is based on concrete developments. One of the regions of the world where the conflict between China and the United States has begun to play out and has had an impact is actually ASEAN, Southeast Asia. Malaysia is part of that region, one of the 10 countries in ASEAN. It is very interesting how ASEAN as a whole has placed itself. These issues are real, there's a great deal of tension and so on, South China Sea, Straits of Malacca, but the majority of ASEAN states are very balanced in their approach. They are close to China in terms of trade and investments and all the rest of it. They know that geography doesn't change. It's a simple truth. You cannot change geography. We are China's neighbors, all of us in ASEAN. And we must know what that means in terms of relations and so on. But at the same time, the United States has been a very, very important player in that region for a long time. You cannot ignore the United States either. So what they do is they try to maintain good relations with both the superpowers. And on certain critical issues, they take a stand which may appear to be pro this or pro that, but essentially it is an attempt to be neutral. This is what they're trying to do. They don't want to be caught in this conflict. Because, there is a saying in that region, in our region, that when the elephants fight, it's the mouse deer that gets killed. And we see ourselves that way. Southeast Asian states, mouse deer, we don't want to be caught in that conflict. And I think that pragmatism is going to dominate their thinking for quite a long while to come. And it may well set the tone of interstate relations in the long run, which is why I think one should try to develop that into a way of dealing with superpowers, dealing with certain ambitious actors in the global scene. Quad, for instance, India is part of Quad, so is Australia. But Quad doesn't have much support within ASEAN. ASEAN states tend to be very wary of Quad. And I think we have an idea now of how they are going to play their cards in the coming years. So I don't think India is going to succeed in drawing them into a conflictual situation. India may have its own designs, but I think India itself, if you look at the way it plays its game, it also knows that it has to be friendly with the ASEAN states. India is friendly with Indonesia. Indonesia is very friendly with China. And India knows that it cannot draw Indonesia into a sort of conflictual relationship with China. It will not happen. They know that. And India knows that, Malaysia, for instance, we have had difficulties with India, but at the same time, we've had good relations with India. China, it has been constant. Very good relations between Malaysia and China, and India will not be able to change that. So I'm much more sort of optimistic about how relations will develop. It'll be their own interests. It'll be the interests of the larger region to which they belong. It will be an attempt to try to evolve intra-state, intra-region relations that are more mature in the future.
I want to bring in quickly. We're almost out of time, yeah. Dr. Chandra. This was a fascinating discussion, despite it being all virtual, and I appreciate all three of my panelists for being here. But Murat, Yeşiltaş, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan likes to repeat time and time again, the world is bigger than 5. But still, the world is caught, if not between all 5, at least between 2 or 3 of these powers, especially Turkey. On the one hand, Turkey wants to buy the F-35 from the United States. It's kicked out of the program. It wants the Patriot missiles, but the technology isn't given. So it turns to Russia to buy the S-400s. And it's caught between different worlds, different powers. The world might not be bigger than 5, but certainly for Turkey, it does revolve around 2 or 3 major powers. Given the scope of our conversation this afternoon, evening here in Turkey, a night in Malaysia, evening in Pakistan, afternoon here where you are in Turkey, how do you square this peg, or how do you circle this peg almost? How do you fit in the situation? We can say all we want, but we are still existing in an order which is a bipolar superpower. It is moving towards a multipolarity, but it isn't there yet. Go ahead, Murad.
Okay, yes, you are right that President Erdogan's discourse about the necessity, it is not an option, by the way, it is a necessity, I think, to make a reform in the context of United Nations. So he is right that the world is, bigger than 5. So his proposal is also important and need to be discussed in the context of international platform. But at the same time, we have some realities. We have some realities about the return of great power politics. We have the realities about the legitimacy crisis of international governance, global governance. We have many problems. United Nations doesn't work. United Nations is that is not an effective organization in preventing conflict, in providing peace and stability vis-a-vis different crises. United Nations is not transparent at all. We do not know how the big fives take their decisions and actions behind the closed doors. So it is not transparent at all. So we have to know all the details about how the big powers, decided about the critical issues in international relations. So it is not accountable. So we have to reform United Nations by taking into consideration the realities of the changing international system. It is not unipolar at all, in which United States can sustain its strategic supremacy. So this world, I think, is over. We have to think about the next international order, but unfortunately, we do not have any crystal clear content of the coming international order. It may be, a bipolar version 2.0, and the new version of bipolar, in which United States and China can, compete against each other, and other states can follow different poles in this context. The international order may also transform towards a new multipolarity, which will be different compared to the 19th century multipolarity, because we have many rising powers. We have different types of emerging powers all across the region. I think this new multipolarity is need to be discussed, and the new regionalism under the new multipolarity will emerge and change their paths of strategic dependency with other powers. I think Turkey is an important country in this context. Turkey has been trying to, recalibrate in its geopolitical location and position in the international relations since 2002, and Turkey is trying to gain its strategic autonomy, not only from the West, but also from Russia and China. This means that Turkey, will not be part of any particular and specific alliance. No, Turkey, of course, will be part of the, Western alliance system at the end of the day. But we will see a kind of autonomous foreign policy and strategic approach of Turkey in the coming years.
Dr. Murad Yeshiltash, Dr. Chandra Muzaffar, and Ambassador Tahmina Janjua, Pakistan's former Foreign Secretary. Thank you so much, all three of you, for this fascinating discussion. And that ends this session of the TRT World Forum on global governance and the challenges and opportunities of multipolarity. Thanks for joining us.